Here are a few things I'd like you to think about before figuring out where you're going to put your shed on your property. Number one, are you going to put it on the ground? This shed, you can see, is above ground a little bit, even though it really doesn't look like it's on any type of a foundation. If you put the shed on the ground, it's a wood shed, and the soil gets wet, it will absorb into the wood. Moisture will absorb into the wood and eventually rot the shed out. This is not a good thing. Wouldn't be a bad idea to separate the shed with some type of a foundation, concrete foundation. And I realize this is going to add some expense to the shed, but if you're not going to do that, well, maybe you should consider raising the shed off the ground with some gravel. Get some 3/4 inch rock, put it around the bottom, flatten it, level it off, and make sure that the gravel is raised up about 3 inches above the ground. That way any moisture that gets underneath the gravel will seep down or away from the shed. I think I'm actually going to do a video on that to explain that a little more. Next up on the list, try to avoid putting plants that need to be watered around the shed. Plants can actually grow, and if you have, like you could see here, I kind of placed the plant. You go back and look at the previous picture. There was actually an opening underneath the shed. This allows for ventilation. A plant might block that ventilation. Keep it away from trees. Wouldn't be a bad idea. You can see here how the tree limb has fallen on the shed. Now, the reason why I'm saying this is just because of the amount of debris that falls on top of the shed. If you do put a shed underneath a tree, make sure that you remove all of the leaves and debris that fall on it. That's the main thing. I mean, tree limbs and stuff like that, this could be an unforeseen thing. And I'm not going to tell you to not put a shed underneath your trees in your backyard for fear of tree limbs falling on them and crushing your shed, even though that would be a concern. I would be more concerned about the leaves that fall and accumulate on top of some sheds and then eventually start to rot and destroy the shed. Last up on the list would just be maintenance. Make sure that you keep the area around the shed, the bottom of the shed, top of the shed, sides, around the corner, everywhere. Keep it clean. You can see here where debris has built up over the years. And again, this could be from something else. I'm not about to suggest that all of the damage here was done from these leaves and debris sitting here. It could be from snow, ice, water, all sorts of other things. But it all brings us back to water. Leaves decompose up against a shed. Decomposed leaves up against a wood shed will start to basically, I know it's hard to believe, will actually start to decompose the wood that is on the shed, whether it's part of the framing or the siding. I think in a nutshell, it is clear to me that you have just got to keep the moisture away from a shed. So if you have a shed with plants, you might want to remove the plants or at least reduce the amount of water that you are using to water the plants to keep them alive. You have got to reduce the amount of water in the ground if you have a shed built on the ground, on top of the soil. You can have sheds that they will last for decades if you keep the water away from the base of the shed. Keep that in mind. So if you're going to rebuild a shed that's already damaged, and there's a good chance that the damage was caused from water, then it would be to your benefit to try and figure out where that water is coming from and divert it somehow away from the shed.